वाहिगुरु जी का खालसा, वाहिगुरु जी की fateh. Today's space, will be in English because I want to use to take some time to talk about a really, I would say, landmark event and a tragedy, a catastrophe, but a very important event to analyze, especially in the world that we are living today, because this chapter of Air India bombing, the bombing of Air India Flight 182, in which 329 innocent uh, passengers, majorly more than 80% of them Canadian citizens of Indian subcontinental origin, were killed, or I would say mass murdered, in the month in June of 1985. And unfortunately, till now, no culprit of that, of that catastrophe, of or of the terror attack, has been meaningfully punished. While everyone in the media, in the intelligence agencies, in the government, knew who the real culprits were. So that is what makes this, this tragedy very unique, because the whole world knew who was behind it, but they never had the courage, the moral courage, to bring the masterminds of this terror attack to justice. So it will tell this. This story will tell a lot about your society and the governments and the system that we live in. Uh, but it is important to kind of understand what happened. Well, some people have joined me on Twitter Space. I am also live streaming this on Twitter, also on my Facebook profile. I'm also going to put this on YouTube, so all this is getting recorded. If you guys are listening to me on Twitter, you can follow my slides. I'm presenting some slides on the Twitter Space. You can probably watch my slides there, or you can go to my YouTube channel and watch the slides, because I'm going to primarily be talking about these slides that are going to come up. So, as the first slide says, the Air India 182 bombing, why everyone knew who did it, but no one was meaningfully punished. First, we need to understand when this bombing happened. This happened around 22nd and 23rd of June 1985. A flight full of passengers took off from Vancouver uh, to Toronto, and from Toronto it went to Montreal airport close by, and from there it was supposed to go to London, and from London it was supposed to go to Mumbai, and from Bombay to Delhi. So it was a convoluted kind of a route with multiple stopovers. And this flight, supposedly, the main theory is that the bomb was loaded on this flight in Vancouver itself without the passenger ever boarding that flight. And that flight with the bomb laden bag actually went to Toronto. And from Toronto, it again went to Montreal. And from Montreal, it again went to London. And just short of London, actually short of Ireland's Cork, the aircraft kind of came down when it was flying at almost 31,000 feet. It suddenly fell off the air, almost like a rock. And there are different theories. Some theories were that a bomb exploded. While none of the investigations ever concluded fully that 100% it was a bomb which brought down the aircraft, but that is kind of widely believed was one of the reasons that that it was some kind of a terror bombing which blew up the aircraft, and it fell down into the ocean. All 329 passengers, innocent passengers, perished. Now, and there were two. The mainstream theory, as per the court case, there were actually two bombs which were placed, one on this flight and one on another flight, which took off from the same airport on the same day from Vancouver, and it went in the other direction towards Tokyo in Narita. And that bomb actually exploded when the aircraft was on the ground, killing two baggage handlers. And the mainstream theory is that both these bombs were planted by the same team and were part of the same conspiracy to cause murder and mayhem. And so that is the sequence of events. I hope you guys understood. It was important to talk about it because people like me who know this event, this is memorized. Most of the community in India knows about it, but world over, people, this event has not been discussed much. It has not been talked about much, so people don't even know in Canada. I'm surprised, that this is what was actually this is the biggest terror attack that ever happened. I would have to say on Canadian soil, because the bombs were loaded on Canadian soil and the Canadian citizens were killed. So this is how this is a high level view of what exactly happened on that day. Now, as I said, like, everybody knew who did it. So why do I say that everyone knew who did it? So before I go into like the actual sequence of events and show you, the all the evidence, let me just spill out my beans up front to you. Let me tell you who did it, because it's not a secret. It's not a secret because listen to or read what CISI's Asia Pacific Bureau Chief. CISIS is the Canadian Intelligence Agency, or Canada's CIA. Its Asia Pacific Bureau Chief had to say about Air India 182. He wrote a book. His name is Michael Jono Karsua. He wrote a book, a very famous book called Nest of Spies, in which he devoted a full chapter on Air India 182 bombing, talking about who did it. And this is his words, and I quote: Flight 182 isn't just a tragedy. It is also a Pandora's box with the leaden weight of Canada's entire governmental apparatus still sitting on the lid and trying to keep it shut. Concealed inside, apart from the murderers, is the dark history of India itself, in the form of steely eyed agents bent on settling New Delhi's accounts and prepared to cross anybody's borders in order to do so. How would Canadians feel if it were known that India's agents provocateurs had pulled just one tiny thread in making this disaster come about? Or at best had known that it was going to happen and chosen to stand aside. What might Canadians do if they discovered that our authorities had tolerated foreign interference that was bound to spill quantities of blood for no other reason than to ensure the continuous prosperity of corporate interests and the untroubled afternoon teas of our diplomats? So Janakatsua, in no other words, tells you who did it. Let's look at what the paper said immediately after the tragedy. Once this terror attack happened, news started leaking in from the police investigation, from the CISIS investigation, that this was some kind of an intelligence operation that was done by India. And I'm just putting up some of the newspaper, heading: Flight 182 sleuths suspected India spy confesses to bomb plans. It was one of the spies of CISIS who confessed that actually India was planning to, bomb one of the aircraft so that they could blame the Sikh separatists who basically resided in Canada and treated Canada as their second home. And there are other newspapers, like the newspapers are full of reports about India's hand in this terror attack. What does he then? Not just that. Let's hear what the CISIR officials said. And I'm quoting here. Globe and Mail actually quoted two senior CISIR officials in their newspaper reports, as well as a book that they published, which till date none of their sources have been challenged in any court of law or by any government. And I'm quoting them. This is what the CISIL official said. So convinced had CISIL become of the Government of India connection that at one Air India task force meeting, a CISIS agent had seriously suggested that if you really want to clear the incidents quickly, take vans down to the Indian High Commission and the consulates in Toronto and Vancouver, load up everybody and take them down for questioning. We know it and they know it that they are involved. Another CISIS official, at about the time the RCMP was making its November arrest, two senior CISIS officials in BC described at a CISIS meeting their version of a criminal flow chart on Sikh violence in Canada. At the very top, they placed the Government of India, and in brackets besides it, the Secret Service Bureau, the CBI, the RAW, and the third agency. Below Government of India were the names of Indian agents of influence and agent provocateurs. Below these were the supporters of the Babbar Khalsa, many of them suspects in the two bombings. CC's agents believed that the RCMP task force was setting its sights too low in the investigation. So the foot soldiers were basically some hired Sikhs who were infiltrated into many of the Sikh separatist movements. But at the top, the masterminds were the Indian intelligence agencies. Another CSIS official, with external CSIS forbade its operators to contact Indian agents. It had concluded that the Indian intelligence agents were more of a threat to Canadian security than a helping hand to Canada's domestic spy service. And one of a CSIS official says, if I was having coffee in a room with a Mountie and a raw agent walked in, I would get up and leave the room, said Gibson. This is what the US senators and congressmen knew. So this is a speech by Honorable Andolphus Towns, who was a congressman from New York. His speech on 31st October 2000 on the floor of the House, where he openly blamed that the real culprit in the Air India bombing is the Indian government. And he was not alone. There were multiple other congressmen, actually 21 congressmen and senators signed a letter on that day to the US government asking US government to declare India a terrorist state. So this is like what the everybody knew. This is why I say that it is no secret who was behind Air India 182 bombing. While all the agencies knew, the government knew, the newspapers knew, the congressmen knew, the senators knew that India was behind it, but the public at large was kept in dark. The public at large was kept in dark about the real culprits. We had, some sham reporters, like, there is a one guy called Terry Molluski from CBC, who was actually the fountainhead of disinformation on this particular topic, where he would constantly deflect the attention away from the Indian government hand in this tragedy and try to just focus it on couple of, low levels operatives in the Sikh community who were probably nothing more than foot soldiers, and try to put this kind of tragedy, to use this tragedy to just blame it on a community rather than the dark hand of government agencies behind this terror attack. So I'll now go into the evidence. I wanted to put this out to you that this is no secret. Everybody knows. Uh, but sadly, the public has been misinformed and disinformed by a sustained campaign of misinformation and disinformation, especially on social media, especially run by the Indian, what I call a vast digital empire of Indian government today, which constantly tries to suppress any minority voice, any voice of reasoning, and will try to hide India's terror acts across the world, the foreign interference that Indian government does in Canadian affairs, in American affairs, in the UK affairs, and especially the suppression of its Sikh minority. So with that, now that we know that's not a secret, let me talk you through, what exactly happened on that flight. Let me pull up the slide which shows you how that, the journey of that aircraft happened. So this is that aircraft. So the aircraft took off from Vancouver and went to Toronto with a bag laden with bombs purposely, and from there it went from Toronto to Montreal, and then it again took off. All this while, no, the passenger who boarded that bag on the aircraft was never there. So a clean-shaven passenger, as per the court records, checks in a baggage which has bomb on it at Vancouver airport. Now, how come the passenger checked in a bag without actually boarding the aircraft when we had a system to actually match baggage manifest with passengers? No answer, no credible answer has been provided by any inquiry, by any court till date. In fact, this was even not even looked at it seriously. This passenger, the clean shaven passenger who checked the bag, never boarded the aircraft. For some reason, the bag with the bomb takes off, lands in Toronto, and very curious sequence of events happen in Toronto, which allow this bag or this bomb to continue its journey on the aircraft. I would have to say, when you will hear about what happened in these two airports in Toronto and Montreal, any reasonable person can make out that it is basically the Air India and the entire Indian government working in tandem to make sure that this aircraft takes off with the bomb on board. So what happens is, as this aircraft comes to Toronto, June of 1985 is the first anniversary of the Indian government attack on India sixth holiest place, which is Darbar Sahib. This is the first anniversary. So in 1984 June, Indian government and its whole army had attacked, the holiest place of Sikhs, and then it was known that it was the first anniversary coming in. Sikhs world over were angry with it, so there were threats against Indian officials, and the whole of all of Air India apparatus was on the highest possible alert because there was specific information available that the Air India flights can be targeted, etc., etc. So in that environment, in the month of June, which was supposed to be the first anniversary, and there was specific intelligence that this flight on 22nd and 23rd June can be targeted, the security officer of Air India mysteriously goes on vacation on a notice of 2 days. He just goes on vacation, say, I need to go on vacation. And then a temporary security officer is flown in from New York. His name is Mr. D'Souza. And this person, Mr. D'Souza, who comes in, plays a critical role in making sure that the bomb is not caught and the aircraft takes off with the bomb. So, what does Mr. D'Souza do? So when Mr. D'Souza comes in on Toronto Airport, the first thing he does is he does not call for a dog squad. The airport is on a level 4 alert, which basically means that you have to have the bags checked by a dog, not just the X-ray machine, by a dog as well as you have to hand check the luggage if required. Now, what happens is on that day, for some mysterious reasons, all the dog squads in Toronto Airport and Montreal, which is very close by, and all other local airports have gone on training to Vancouver very conveniently. Okay, fine. If they have gone on training, this officer was supposed to actually call a backup dog squad from the local police, but he never arranged that backup dog squad. Okay, the backup dog squad goes missing. Mysteriously, even then, the bomb should have been caught by either the X ray machine or the handheld scanners. But mysteriously, just 15 minutes before this bag was supposed to be X rayed by the machine, 15 minutes before that, the X ray machine breaks down. What was the fault of the X-ray machine? Why it broke down? How it came back online just a couple of hours after this aircraft took off? No, took off. Nobody knows because the technician who came to fix the X-ray machine was never able to find a fault. So he basically said something must have happened. I don't know what happened, but now it is working. And so this machine stops working mysteriously. 75% of the bags have been checked and only a couple of bags are left, out of which this bag is there, so it is not x-rayed. So the temporary security staff from another agency which Air India has hired, they basically start using handheld sniffers. These sniffers basically sniff the fumes, and if you have an explosive they can give you a beep. As those security staff start scanning the bag, this security officer who comes in for one day, Mr. D'Souza, he immediately grabs the sniffer from one person's hand and tells them that he is doing it incorrectly. And he gives a what I call a demonstration, which is a deliberate misdirection of the person. What he does is he takes the handheld sniffer, lights a matchstick, takes the matchsticks very, very close to the scanner, and as the matchstick comes next to the scanner starts beeping a loud whistling noise because the fumes are so close to the scanner. So he starts off at a distance and brings it close, and they say, when you hear this whistling noise, this is the type of noise that you will hear if there is actually a bomb in the bag. Now, as you can make out, that is patently false because the bomb will be inside the baggage. So the sniffer will be outside. You won't get a whistling noise. You will get a beep or a small noise because there's the distance between the fumes, the source, and where the sniffer is. That was just common sense, but he deliberately told them that you have to listen for a whistling noise. So in the court, in the inquiries, the person who was then using the sniffer, he actually tells the police that when he was actually scanning and he discreetly remembers that brown zipper bags, he actually heard the beeps. But because this guy had given me a demonstration that I'm going to hear a whistling noise, I basically had to let it go. If he had not given the demonstration, I would have kept that bag aside. Anyways, So that happened. This is how the bag got through the security in Toronto. Now, from Toronto, the aircraft takes off, and this Mr. D'Souza actually boards this aircraft. It goes to Montreal, which is around 3 hours by road and maybe half an hour by flight, and he lands at Montreal. And in Montreal, again, a very curious incident happens. The bags which were supposed to, the passengers which were going to board from Montreal, in those bags there were two very suspicious bags which were identified by the baggage handling staff. Now the Air India security guys were supposed to call the backup dog squad as well as the RCMP because these two suspicious bags were identified. But the Air India staff refused to call the police while they are on the highest of alerts. For almost 5 hours, the bags were lying there on the floor, and the Air India staff refused to call the RCMP. So there's actually in documents, Air Canada staff at that airport tells the Air India staff that they should call RCMP. They don't call. Then they give them another call. They don't call. So finally, at 10 p.m., Air Canada decides to call the RCMP themselves directly. They're saying, okay, these Air India guys are not interested in getting these bag checked and they're not following the SOP. They themselves call the RCMP at 10 p.m. and RCMP immediately calls the backup dog squad. Now, in the meanwhile, this aircraft has landed in Montreal, and this guy, Mr. D'Souza, comes off the aircraft, and then he starts a fight with the airport staff and says, I cannot wait for this backup dog squad. My aircraft has to take off because we are losing money. Now, the backup dog squad was only 1 hour away. At 10 p.m., they were informed by 11 it should have been there. But because this security officer, D'Souza, refuses to wait for that, backup dog squad, and unilaterally, after kind of creating a ruckus, force clears this aircraft to take off. That is when this aircraft took off, and, none of the baggage again got checked by a dog squad. Otherwise, it would have been the bomb would have been easily caught. The dogs are almost 99% successful in catching explosive. If you go by statistics. So, so this mysterious Mr. D'Souza, nobody ever found out where he is. He never appeared in the court case that actually happened. And the only incident, you will not find his direct statements in any of the inquiry reports. Even none of the inquiries called him. I believe he was probably dead by the time some of the inquiries took place. You will not find any. The only where you find one statement from him is in the inquiry that was done by the airport, that okay, what kind of misses happened in the security. Otherwise, this mysterious guy, not even his picture is not available in any of the documents. And there are like multiple inquiries, multiple court cases. Nobody knows from where he came, why he behaved like the way he did, and why did he acted so strangely on that day. Anyway, this aircraft takes off, and as I said, at 30,000 feet. Okay, another thing, very curious thing is happening is this aircraft was late because there was another engine, which was a Boeing engine, which was tied to its wing because that engine had to be carried to India. So it is okay to practice to kind of, when you have to transport an engine, you can actually attach it to the wing. It is non-functional. It is not kind of making any function, but it's an extra engine. So it was carrying actually, the aircraft was carrying five engines on its wings. And due to that extra weight, this aircraft could not travel at a normal 33,000 feet height. It was traveling at 30,000, 31,000 feet height and was a bit slow. So this aircraft then kind of drops from the air just 100 miles off the coast of Ireland, and all the inquiries kind of point to some kind of blast. Maybe they're not conclusive whether it was a bomb or something that brought down the aircraft, but the conclusion was that because there was another bomb exploded on this other flight in Tokyo, most probably there was a bomb in this bag as well, which kind of blew up in midair and brought the aircraft down. So this is the strange, mystery of how the bomb got on this aircraft. Now all this happens. As I said, the inquiry starts. The police starts to find Indian hand all over this case, and the CC very quickly figures out that who is the main mastermind. They figure out that there is a mysterious businessman. His name is Ripu Daman Malik, who has suddenly become super rich in Surrey and influential. He used to own a non-consequential, cloth shop, but just couple of months, actually exactly 1 year before this tragedy, he was given a $2 million credit line by State Bank of India in Vancouver. You can imagine in that time a $2 million credit line to somebody who has a nondescript cloth shop. And CSIS had figured out that this person was the one who was financing many of the violent Sikh extremists in the Vancouver area, quote unquote, Babbar Khalsa. And this person was getting all his money from Government of India through that $2 million credit line. And this is the person who was also, there were witnesses who kind of claimed that this is the person who was actually trying to get a bomb onto an Air India aircraft. There were first-hand witnesses who were claiming, who CC had gotten an access to, who basically confirmed that Ripu Daman Malik was trying to get a bomb onto the aircraft. But CC's hands were tied. CC's hands were tied because now the relationships of Canada with the Indian government were at stake. If you were going to make this information public, that would have broken down all the diplomatic relationship between Canada and India. So a via way had to be formed. And why, at that point in time, one of the reasons was, let me show you, was that India was in the process of giving, India had, like given as a carrot at that point in the world, and in that era, the biggest pipeline contract in the world for roughly around $2 billion was up for grabs, and the Canadian company was the top contender for it. And we'll talk about that. Let me show you, and the role that that contract played in hushing up this inquiry. Okay, before I go there, I also wanted to kind of show you another bizarre coincidence had happened and at the airport. This aircraft, this doomed aircraft, was supposed to have many Indian government officials on board. By a bizarre coincidence, all the people who had any strong Indian government link refused to board this aircraft last minute. And these are the names, if you can see on my screen. The prominent of them was Surinder Malik, the Consul General of India in Vancouver. He was supposed to travel with his wife, his kid on summer vacation, and he refused to just board the aircraft. Which government official can afford to let go this big sum, like all the money that they spent on air tickets for once in a year vacation? I don't know. Mr. Surinder Malik apparently was too desperate not to board this aircraft. Along with Surinder Malik, Siddhartha Singh, who was one of the best pals of Surinder Malik, not Siddhartha Singh, that's a different guy. Siddhartha Singh, he's the head of North American Affairs, External Affairs Ministry of India. He was supposed to go. He also refused to board. Then Ujjal Dosanjh, along with his wife and kids, who was the fast friend of Surinder Malik, the Indian Consul General. And later, Ujjal Dosanjh also played a key role in this trial because he became the Attorney General as well as the Premier of BC. And we'll talk about his role. His role will come up again. He also refused to board the aircraft. Then there's a Toronto car dealer and his entire family who was supposed to travel with Surinder Malik and his family because they were fast buddies. He also refused to board the aircraft. Then a sister-in-law of a Dal Khalsa leader who was reportedly very close to, some of the Babbar Khalsa leaders at that point in time, she also refused to board the aircraft. All these guys had this strange connection to Indian government, and they basically, and no explanation has been given why they refused to board the aircraft last minute. Now, as I said, if you can see my screen, within months the CC investigation started, coming up with the Indian hand, what was going on, and but the Canadian government was unwilling to kind of jeopardize the trade deal. Here it is, and I'm quoting my Twitter tweet on this. You can go to my Twitter space, and there's a 39 tweet thread on it, and I'm going to take selective tweets out of it to walk you through. There was an external affairs minister at that time was Joe Clark, and he was not willing to jeopardize the trade relations with India, which was their gateway to trade with the third world. Uh, And I'm going to quote from the report by Globe and Mail. Uh, The word out of the department, however, was that Canada was working on some type of pipeline deal with India and nothing would be done to strain relations between the two countries. The pipeline story was true. A Canadian company was in the bidding for the biggest pipeline project in the world. The Calgary based Nova Corporation, with external helping to open the doors, had bid on a pipeline deal in India worth about $1.9 billion. Now, under pressure from external, all talks of Indian hand had to be buried. And Mr. Joe Clark was also known for his insensitivity towards sex and being over eager to safeguard Canada-India relationships. However, as fate would have it, in the end, Canada actually lost that $2 billion bid. And immediately after they lost the bid, the Canada actually expelled all of India's top diplomats from Canada. All of India's in 1986, which includes all the top three diplomats. In One is in Vancouver, another in Montreal, another in Ottawa. They were all told to pack the bag along with their entire diplomatic staff. And India did not do even a single retaliation. No explanation was given why they were asked to pack up. No, India never explained, Canada never explained. But everybody knew what was happening. Now, once this happened, this, as I said, the CC's agents were totally frustrated by the politicians burying, the Indian hand, prioritizing international relationships over, national security, over justice, and they started like CC started leaking like a sieve. And we had that very famous book come out. The book's name is Soft Target, written by the two top journalists of the two highest circulating dailies in Canada. One is Globe and Mail, and the other is Toronto Star. Mr. Juhair Kashmiri and Brian McAndrew. Both of these individuals, throughout the rest of their life, had to live a life, which was filled with the threats by Indian government. Brian McAndrew, even today, it is very difficult to get access to him because of the threat to his life that he faces from, Indian intelligence. Zuhair Kashmiri then, wrote about, how much ordeal he had to go through, how his wife was, blackmailed, especially because his wife had some relatives in India, etc., etc. But hats off to these guys. They both, were the ones who then got the CC sources and they quoted, exactly how the whole planning of this event was done. Now, surprisingly, this is 1988. The book was published, and none of this book was ever challenged, okay, by Indian government or any of the individuals who were named in this book. Even they never challenged for defamation or anything, because each and every word was backed by evidence. So Globe and Mail already named that the Indian government got it done through their main, agent in Canada, whose name was Ripu Daman Malik. And so Global Mail named Ripudaman Malik, Ajay Singh Bagdi, Rayat, and Parmar as agents of Indian government with a hand in the bombing. Ripudaman Malik, Global Mail quoted, was financed $2 million credit line by Government of India. Money he then used to fund Babur Khalsa, known for violent activities. And Malik actually even admitted that yes, he got a $2 million loan. When he was asked, okay, why come, you are the financer, everybody knows you are funding, activities against India. Why is India giving you, this $2 million loan? And then his response was, oh, that is because, I'm a good businessman. And all this while, Mr. Malik's business was actually importing, small stuff from India and kind of selling it in Canada. Like, like a mom and pop store for small trinkets that you will get, like small chudis, suits, etc., etc. Can you imagine like how much worth that shop will be? The shop will probably in that year not be more than worth like $100,000. And against that, the State Bank of India, which is known to never give loans to people, gave a credit line of $2 million. And and knowing fully well that this person is using all that money to fund activities against India, but India had apparently no issues. And not only this person, Ripudaman Malik, he became one of the most prominent Sikh faces in, Surrey. He started running Sikh schools. he had a stranglehold on the community which no other Sikh had. But apparently, his main benefactor was the Indian government. And um in 1992, the same person, Ripudaman Malik, by this time it was known that he is a Babar Khalsa supporter. He actually went to India for complete 1 year. All his business, all the stuff that he bought and sold in Vancouver came from India. How he went to India, how he stayed there for 1 year at the height of Sikh militancy, while his name was already out there, a big supporter of Babur Khalsa, nobody's able to answer like what was going on out here. And he comes back as if like he's a state guest. His accounts are running with State Bank of India. Nobody is freezing those funds, and it was very clear, that what's going on, and the agencies knew about it, and Globe and Mail reported on it. And you will see all these people who spread disinformation on Air India 182 bombing about, and try to hide India's hand. They will never talk about Ripu Daman Malik. And he was the guy who was eventually charged in the only case that was brought to court for Air India 182 bombing. The only person, the main accused, was Ripu Daman Malik. And that case, why it came out, we'll talk about it. But the disinformation spreaders like CBC, Terry Milosky and his, other sold out journalists, they will never talk about this guy. In fact, if you ask them that, okay, why was he getting the money, they will start defending him. They'll say, oh, he was such a good guy. What if he gave a couple of $1,000 to Babur Khalsa? He was a good, community member. What? Like they will openly kind of defend a terror accused and try to blame it on the community rather than actually really get a handle of the people who are actually pumping in the money to do the act. Anyways, so Malik, we talked about, and these are these tweets where I talked, think goes about. There's another individual that India is constantly blaming while all this is going on. India media starts to pick up one person's name, says this guy Talvinder Singh Parmar is the main accused, like person who did the bombing, and they ask for the custody of Talvinder Singh Parmar from Canada. The Canadian investigation doesn't lead any direct results against Mr. Parmar, so they do not arrest him. They arrest him once in 86, but he had 85 itself, but he had to be released because there was no evidence. So Mr. Talvinder Parmar is a known like a face of resistance against India, and he actually travels to India through Pakistan. He kind of smuggles through himself to the border, but he's caught by India in 1992. Now, common sense would have it that India has gotten custody of the guy they said is the one who did the bombing. So India is now going to run a court case and produce this guy in front of the world. But even before the Canadian investigators could reach India, Indian government didn't even inform Canadian investigators. They've gotten older of the guy that they were all the time blaming for the bombing. Indian agencies murdered Mr. Sardar Talvinder Singh Parmar in their own custody. And no explanation was given why they murdered him. And no court case was ever run, because if you ran a court case, maybe he knew too much and things would have spilled out. But like it's as like a clever criminal who had to hide his own footsteps. The Indian government cleanly kind of murdered another individual in their own custody, and to kind of bury the real truth of what's actually going on. And none of these media guys questioned like, why did Indian government not run a trial where people could openly see what is going on, what is evidence? No, that was never done. Once Mr. Parmar was murdered, Sudhakar Singh Parmar, because he was running a resistance campaign against India, he naturally became the hero for the Sikhs. And they would put his pictures around different, Nagar Kirtans, etc. Okay, this is going on. While all this is going on, uh, the community is outraged. The families, the victims are outraged because, uh, just hold on. The victims are outraged because they are not getting any justice. The families of the victims. The Sikh community is outraged because of the disinformation campaign that India ran. Oh, this is Sikhs who did it. The agencies had to keep quiet. They tried to help by leaking some information through Globe and Mail, but the Sikhs started facing widespread spread discrimination within the Canadian society. They started being labeled as terrorists, and overnight the Sikh movement. Sikhs were the victim of Indian government repression. Their holiest place, Darbar Sahib, was attacked. Thousands were murdered by the military. Then in the same year, another thousands of people were innocents were murdered across 118 cities in India. Kids, children, raped, killed. Then for a decade, Indian government launched a jungle rule in Punjab, killing up, picking up and killing any young Sikh that they will find. In spite of all that, with this one act, the Indian government was able to portray Sikhs as terrorists rather than community which was fighting for its own genuine human rights and basic freedom. And uh, and and they were successful because Canada was not willing to spoil the relationships and kind of lay this blame officially on India, while unofficially CCs will leak all this news, this evidence will come out. So the Sikh community in Canada had to undergo a lot because they were being looked upon as terrorists. And so this continued. The community couldn't take it any longer. Obviously, there were members in the community who started speaking out. Especially, they started reaching out to CISIs with the names of these foot soldiers who were involved against Ripu Daman Malik, against, so there were five witnesses who on their own came to CISIs telling them, and all Sikh and one Caucasian, telling the CCs about how Ripu Daman Malik is the one who was the financer behind all this that is going on, and Ripu Daman Malik was trying to get a bomb onto the aircraft, etc., etc., etc. And these one of the ladies who was was actually working in the same school that Mr. Ripu Daman Malik ran. Allegedly, she and Mr. Malik had what they call a non-sexual but loving relationship, platonic relationship, and she was very close, obviously, to Malik. And then she came out and she detailed, like in her testimony, like how Mr. Malik explained to her in his weak moments that how he basically prepared the bomb and who all he took to the airport and asked them to kind of get the bag on and then etc. So she was a first-hand witness, and all that testimony was available. She was not the only first-hand witness. There was another, Mr. Dhillon. He also came out, who was a friend of Mr. Malik, who told that Mr. Malik had also approached him with a request to put a bag on Air India aircraft, for which he was willing to pay $100,000 to him, and which he refused to do. So there were not one, there were actually five witnesses, first-hand witnesses, against Mr. Malik. So RCMP had no option but to charge Mr. Malik, and he was eventually charged in year 2001. That is when the first court case, any charges came out, and this is how many years? 15 years after the event. First time any charges were brought against somebody against whom a book had already been published in 12 years before, that this is the guy who's getting money from India and he's the guy who's kind of doing all this stuff on behalf of Indian government. 12 years after that book is published, everything that it is said in that book is proven true, now is being charged in a court case. What was RCMP doing those 12 years? Nobody knows. But these five witnesses were there. They had to charge him. Now, one of the witnesses, as I said, the lady who was treated like a spurned lover, it was easy to kind of put blame on her to say she was rebuffed by Mr. Malik, so she wanted to get back at him, so you could discredit her. Other witnesses also were not of very big, I would say, public standing or very intelligent people. You could discredit them. But there was one witness whom you just could not discredit. This witness was Mr. Sardar Tara Singh Here. Sardar Tara Singh Here was one of the most, I would say, awarded journalist in Canada at that point in time. And he gave a witness report that he had overheard this conspiracy in a garage when he was there, where he had heard this is a conspiracy and Malik and Bagdi are involved. And when he go with that, it is how do you discredit somebody who is so intelligent, so well known? You can't kind of falsify, and he had no incentive. So just before the trial, Sardar Tara Singh here, who was supposedly under so much threat, was murdered conveniently, even while being under RCMP protection, because he was influential. He knew his life was under threat. He was already crippled by a bomb that exploded in his office 10 years back. He had asked the RCMP to give him protection. RCMP had put cameras on his property to monitor him, to give him protection. But those cameras never worked for 6 months. They never worked from day one, mysteriously. And who killed Mr. Hare? Here, nobody, everybody knows it has to be Mr. Malik's man, but they, RCMP till date couldn't solve that case. And do you know who was the head of RCMP when Mr. Hare was killed? Same Mr. Ujjal Dosanjh, who refused to get onto the aircraft, the friend of Indian Consul General. He was the Attorney General of BC in the time period during which Mr. Hare was murdered, because RCMP, I have to say, was compromised because RCMP put on cameras and those cameras didn't work. Like, how can RCMP come and put on camera on your house and not know that the cameras are not working for 6 months? Like, I have put on like three cameras, let us say, to monitor something. Am I not going to check like the footage? Like, is it working or not? So, so here comes Mr. Ujjal Dosanjh back again into the picture. He is the Attorney General, and under his watch, Mr. Tara Singh here is murdered. And so, anyways, so this happens. The everybody expects now. The court case ran from 2001 till 2005 because of the number of witnesses that were against the accused, Ripudaman Malik. Everybody thought this is a close and shut case, but strangely, this judge, his name is Ian Thompson. Let me get his name here. Yeah, the judge, his name is Ian Josephson. Sorry, Ian Josephson. He, to the surprise of everybody on the court in the court on that day, said, "Okay, this." He figured out some technicality, and yes, the defense did a good job of undermining the witnesses, and he basically kind of said these, witnesses don't stand, and all the accused are to be let go of free. Now that was a shocker. The whole obviously, the families of victims were shocked. The Sikh community itself was shocked. What's going on? There were certain people from their community who were charged, and now they're being let off. Who is behind all this? So they were let off. There was a huge outcry. So the government of Canada then, under pressure of that outcry, they could have very easily appealed that court case, but they never appealed that court case because there's so much evidence there. That was a ripe case for appeal. But no, the media never asked the government, why are you not appealing? And the government never bothered to appeal. What the government did was, government, to kind of pacify the public mood, they said, we will do a public inquiry. That was called the Major John John Major Public Inquiry. But lo behold, that public inquiry was a sham, because very cleverly, while they projected in the media that this is a public inquiry to investigate who did this bombing, the terms of reference of the public inquiry specifically forbade Mr. John Major from fixing the responsibility of the bombing, or to finding out anything which links Indian government specifically to the bombing. In the terms of inquiry itself, they said this inquiry will only focus on the coordination between the agencies and the lapses at the airport. Nothing else, nothing outside it. It is not in the charter of Mr. John Major to say who was the mastermind or who was actually behind this bombing. So that was the sham inquiry that was set up. Once the inquiry was set up, many Sikh organizations, World Sikh Organization, WSO being the prominent of them, made multiple representations that, hey, we have this public inquiry, we have evidence, we have CC's official who wants to come and tell you and give you the evidence that what they know about Indian hand. We have reporters from Globe and Mail, we have reporters from Toronto Star, we have first hand witnesses who know what has happened and they want to come and tell you what has happened. They even had one police official from India who risked his entire life and came here secretly, who wanted to give an in camera testimony. But the inquiry, Major John inquiry, refused to even grant any audience to the. They didn't even give WSO like a status to be part of that inquiry, because as per Major John Sham, that was not his terms of reference. And I'm going to read what their response was to WSO representation. Let me pull that up. So here is the inquiry, major inquiry. Yeah. So if you guys can see my screen, those who are watching me on Twitter, this is that reply that Major uh, John Major gave to WSO. WSO asked for calling off Zuhair Kashmiri, the reporters, the CC agents, blah blah blah, and whatnot. And I'm going to read and quote specifically the response of John Major. He says, a review of the terms of reference of this commission of inquiry reveals that the investigation of the bombing of Air India Flight 182 is intended to serve as a backdrop and reference point for issues as to the degree of cooperation demonstrated between the departments and agencies of the Government of Canada, including RCMP and CCs. The investigation is also intended to present a reference point for the issue of transforming security intelligence into evidence admissible in a criminal trial. So he's saying this is my mandate to look at the coordination between agencies. And then he says, this is the clincher. None of the terms of reference calls for an inquiry into the issue of who was responsible for the bombing of Flight 182, nor of the role, if any, of the Government of India, nor of the thoroughness of the investigation of any such role by the RCMP and or CSIS. So, so then you ask yourself, what was this inquiry for? Well, this was inquiry plain and simple to whitewash Indian government hand and to fool the people that we are going to get you justice. So this is how, and this inquiry report is what some of the disinformation spreaders, journalists who Indian government then bought on their roles, like cheap journalists who probably are struggling in a retired life, like Terry Mulosky. They then quote, "Oh, this is that inquiry which has given India free hand. India had nothing to like." The inquiry was specifically forbade from actually fixing the responsibility and telling us who the mastermind is. So the real question is then, what is that? Why was this inquiry? The question you have to ask is, why was Canadian government so desperate to make sure that this inquiry does not fix the responsibility for bombing? Why were they so desperate to say specifically don't inquire into the role of Government of India? It raises obvious questions. Those questions are never asked, unfortunately. Okay, while all this is happening, the the WSO keeps kind of, Sikh organizations keep pressing for a real inquiry, a genuine inquiry. Obviously, nothing comes out of Major John Major inquiry, and then we have CC agents who know that nothing, no truth will be ever allowed to come out. They started writing books about it, about the hand of India. I already quoted to you what Gianno Katsuo said. This is what Francisco Lavigno said when he was asked, "Can this happen again? Can we have a similar terror attack?" And I'm quoting Francisco Lavigno. He was the main investigator from CCS. Could it happen again? Quote: "It isn't so much if as when," says former Canadian Security and Intelligence Service officer Francisco Lavigno. So Francisco Lavigno says, the major commission into the 1985 Air India bombing suffered from the fatal flaw of not being allowed to investigate the role of the Indian government in the attack. So, because Canadian government still would not allow the evidence about Indian government hand to come out, the security officials are saying it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. The Indians are going to do it because they know that the Canadian government is willing to buckle under pressure. So that is why once this recent murder of Sardar Hardeep Singh Najjar, another Canadian citizen on Canadian soil, was done, and India was caught red-handed, where evidence is available with the United States, with Canadian agencies, and when Trudeau asked Indian government that, hey, why are you killing my citizens? Indian government basically asked Trudeau to f off, because for them, when you were not even you're willing to let us kill 329 people, what is one or two more people being killed? After all, they are brown skinned Indians or from India, so Indian government has the right to kill them even if they are in Canada. And because Canada government had set a precedence that they are willing to let India to come and murder Canadian citizens if they are of Indian descent, and not treat them at par with Caucasian Canadian citizen. Now the precedence has been set. So Trudeau, when he raised this issue of the murder of Sardar Deep Singh Nijjar, was actually going back on an agreement that Canada had already de facto entered with the Indian government, that they will let Indian government come and operate on Canadian soil, control, kill, whatever, people of Indian descent. So Mr. Modi was right in feeling enraged about the statement by Mr. Justin Trudeau, that why are you questioning me now, when we have been doing it for almost 2 decades. So so this is the sad story, the sad story of Air India 182, because everybody knows that Indian government was there, its agents were there. There's the realms of evidence available on it with ceases. uh, but for the sake of international relationships, the Canada is just not able to muster up the courage. And Canada is a small country. It's only 48 million people. India has around 1.5 billion people. India's economy is bigger. And India, today almost has too much influence within Canada. Indian Prime Minister can influence Canadian elections. Nobody in Canada can safely win Canadian elections without the vote of Indian Americans or Indian Canadians. And a good number of them are today influenced by Indian nationalism. So that's the sad reality. And this the I don't know whether I call it funny. I say it the ironic part, and that it was known that the victims will never get justice from very day one itself. When this aircraft went down, there were 329 passengers on it. More than 85% were Canadian citizens, and more than 80% were actually Hindus. So you can call them, Indian Canadian Hindus who were there on the plane. And when they died, uh, what should have happened? These were Canadians. More than 85% are Canadian citizens. So Canada's citizens died, and the plane was going to India. Canada's Prime Minister deserved to receive sympathy messages. So Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi should have called Canadian PM expressing his sympathy on what has happened, and offering help on investigation and making sure culprits are punished. But a very ironic thing happened. Canadians died, but the Canadian Prime Minister was the one who called up Rajiv Gandhi, the Indian Prime Minister, and offered condolences for your people having died. That itself kind of, gave the cat out of the bag. The attitude of the Canadian leadership was that these people, they might hold Canadian passports, but they are not our citizens, or at least they were not treated as equal citizens. If those 329 people were all Caucasian, I can bet my entire life and experience this would not have been the reaction. Canadian Prime Minister would not have been calling Rajiv Gandhi and offering condolences. Canadian Prime Minister would have been sending a destroyer, an aircraft carrier to Indian coast to set India to order. Just because these were brown-skinned Hindus who died, brown people killed brown people, the Canadian apparatus basically overlooked and prioritized a $2 billion pipeline deal over, the plain, blood, murder, and justice for the victims. That is, biggest case of institutional racism that I have seen, a live example in my, study of human history. And that is the sad truth. So why we can blame India for killing its minorities, doing stupid acts? It's a third world country. We know India is an authoritarian regime. It has never treated its minorities correctly. Its security agencies are out of control. They are a law unto themselves. They can go and murder anybody and anywhere. But this cover up also said a lot about Canada. It also said, how Canada treats and looks at its sovereignty. So that is why I treat that the fact that Mr. Justin Trudeau stood up in Canadian Parliament and first time took the name of India as somebody who is doing transnational terrorism on Canadian soil as a monumental moment in Canadian history. This is the first time Canada has shown the gumption that it is a sovereign country, that it has some knees to stand on. So all kudos to him. But I have to say, it has come maybe too little, too late. But the history will judge us, how things go on from here. But this is what happened, in Canada, Air India 182 saga. On my profile on Twitter, there's a full 39 tweet thread with all the evidence, all the references of different court cases, judgments. I have given screenshots. You guys are welcome to go through it whenever you get time. I advise anybody who's interested in it should read it. Hopefully, it is easy to understand. I also have done a lot of spaces on it. You can listen to those recordings on my YouTube channel. Uh, yeah. So, and if you have any question, you can always, direct message me, write to me. I have challenged anybody anybody to disapprove a single piece of evidence in any of my tweets. And till now, nobody has been able to disapprove it. Not a single tweet. Because everything comes with reference and evidence. You can go and verify it yourself. I have challenged, the biggest disinformation spreader on this issue, Terry Mollusky and many of these Indian commentators to come and debate me if they want to on the evidence. They can disapprove any of these evidence. They can write against it. Nobody has written anything. Nobody has dared to come and speak to me because they know all this is, out there. The evidence is out there. You just have to go and look. I think the hope of these disinformation spreaders were that nobody will go and actually look at these court cases. Nobody will actually go and read these newspapers. Nobody will go and piece this all together and present it to the audience. But sadly for them, the Sikh Kaum is living. So there'll be many like me who will piece up the truth and show it to the world. So hopefully this is helpful. I'll open up the space for any questions. If anybody wants to come and you can ask for the speaker, and if you have a question, you can ask. Yeah. Ayanar is here. Ayanar, how are you, brother? Let me send you a speaker. If anybody needs, I know there is a okay. Anybody else needs a speaker? If nobody's going to take a speaker for a couple of, I'll wait for a couple of minutes and I'll end the stream and we will talk later. Okay. Ravneet has asked for the speaker. And Ravneet, we can switch to Punjabi if, whosoever, ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਭਾਸ਼ਾ 'ਚ comfortable ਆ, you can ask question, not an issue. ਹਾਂ ਰਵਨੀਤ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ ਹਾਂ ਰਵਨੀਤ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ ਹਾਂਜੀ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਫਤਿਹ ਹਾਂਜੀ ਰਵਨੀਤ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਕੋਈ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਹੈਗਾ ਵੀ ਇਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ 에ਅਰ ਇੰਡੀਆ 1 ਐਂਡ 2 ਬਾਰੇ ਐਨੀਥਿੰਗ ਯੂ ਵਾਂਟ ਟੂ ਐਡ ਔਰ ਆਸਕ ਔਰ ਸਮਥਿੰਗ ਐਨੀਥਿੰਗ ਮੇਰਾ ਇੱਕ ਸੁਜੈਸ਼ਨ ਸੀਗਾ ਵੀ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਮਿਹਨਤ ਕਰਕੇ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਕਰਕੇ ਸਾਰਾ ਤਿਆਰ ਕੀਤਾ ਹਨਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਡਿਊਸਰ ਨੂੰ ਅਪਰੋਚ ਕਰੋ ਜਾਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਡਾਇਰੈਕਟਰ ਨੂੰ ਕਿ ਇਹਦੇ ਤੇ ਮੂਵੀ ਬਣਾਈ ਜਾਏ ਤੇ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਵੱਡੇ ਸਕਰੀਨ ਤੇ ਦਿਖਾਇਆ ਜਾਵੇ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਨੂੰ ਕਿ ਸੱਚਾਈ ਕੀ ਸੀਗੀ ਅੱਜ ਕੱਲ੍ਹ ਕਿੰਨੀ ਮੂਵੀਜ਼ ਆ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਹਨਾ ਹਾਈਜੈਕਿੰਗ ਤੇ ਜਾਂ ਹਾਈਸਟ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਤੇ ਇਹ ਤੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਤਗੜਾ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਮਤਲਬ ਕਿ ਰਿਕਾਰਡ ਕੀਤਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡਾ ਤੇ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਕਿਸੇ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਮਤਲਬ ਅਸੀਂ ਜੇ ਬਿਗ ਸਕਰੀਨ ਤੇ ਲੈ ਆਈਏ ਇਟ ਵਿਲ ਬੀ ਅ ਹਿਊਜ ਇੰਪੈਕਟ ਔਨ ਪੀਪਲ ਰਾਈਟ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਲੋਕੀ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਅੱਜ ਕੱਲ੍ਹ ਸਿਨੇਮਾ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਜੇ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ ਕੁਝ ਮਤਲਬ ਕਿ ਅਪਰੋਚ ਕਰੀਏ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਹਨਾ ਕੋਈ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰੋਡਿਊਸ ਕਰ ਸਕੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਸਾਗਰ ਹਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਉਮੀਦ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਬਹੁਤ ਵਧੀਆ ਗੱਲ ਆ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਮੈਂ ਪਹਿਲਾ ਜੋ ਐਫਰਟ ਕਰਨ ਲੱਗਾ ਨਾ my next plan is to actually write a book because soft target was first version was written in 1988 that time lot of evidence was out but not the full story was out after that the updated version was published in 2005 after the court case ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ Mr. Kashmiri and had actually died that work has to be carried forward now we are in 2023 uh, and oh I wanted to tell you like I forgot to add the main accused the financer Mr. Ipudaman Malik he actually was invited by India again in 2019 and he went to India as a state guest he was received by all these big politicians in India as if like some kind of a bridge between the Sikh community and Indian government and when he came back in 2020 he was actually murdered in Surrey nobody knows who murdered him till now right? so so this is a very intriguing sorry but ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਗੱਲ ਸਹੀ ਹੈ that this deserves my first plan is to write a book about it with the updated evidence and the events that have transpired after the second version of soft target was written that is the year 2005 so we can add more details to it and hopefully we'll try I think the first thing we need to write a book so then the story is fully available in a condensed form and then I think this should be a very very attractive topic for anybody in the movie industry to make a good movie on I am in talk with couple of media people to do like ਉਹ ਸਾਡੇ media ਛੋਟਾ ਮੋਟਾ ਕਿ ਇਹਦੇ ਪਰ ਛੋਟੇ ਮੋਟੇ ਡਾਕੂ ਸੀਰੀਜ਼ ਬਣਾ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਜਾਵੇ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਹਨਾ so we'll try. If you know anybody, put him in touch. I'm happy to put my effort, time, whatever I can do, to get the truth out. हाँ जी रोड़ा भी आ गया रोड़ा long time man long time no see where have you been yeah Rola can you take the mic if not that's fine okay और किसी को कोई सवाल है if not then we'll close the space and I'll wait for 1 minute and then we'll meet again okay, we have no more questions. Okay, guys, thank you everyone, and please do share the video. I had it live streamed, so you can share my live stream with people. Please retweet it so maximum people who are English speaking can understand what actually happened in Air India 1 and 2. Please also retweet my main Twitter thread on this issue. That thread is pinned on my main account. If you go to my profile, you should see that as the first pinned tweet. You can repost it. Please get this video out to maximum people. I'm going to upload this video also on YouTube. I will share that link of the YouTube video as well. You guys can share that as well. So let's get the truth out to maximum number of people. With that being said, ਆਪਾਂ ਇਜਾਜ਼ਤ ਲਈਏ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਦਾ ਨਾਮ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਨਾਨਕ ਨਾਮ ਚੜ੍ਹਦੀ ਕਲਾ ਤੇਰੇ ਭਾਣੇ ਸਰਬੱਤ ਦਾ ਭਲਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ